The thing that we really want to, the point we want to get across is that we want to get coaches to think more in terms of scaling and training options for double unders when it comes to programming a workout or scaling a workout for individuals that do or don't have double unders. Okay, it seems like what we've experienced in our many years involved with CrossFit is that, you know, the old-fashioned, you know, do 3 times the amount of singles to equal 1 double under in a workout is pretty prevalent. And I've even seen some coaches do you know, 5 times the amount of singles to represent 1 double under. And when I talk to coaches about that, they usually say that they are, you know, trying to entice, kind of through punishment, but entice the athlete to want to practice their double unders more. All right, and I get that, but you know, I would like to replace punishment with progression. And I think if you take progression and you add those into your WODs and you make that you know, a scaled movement for a WOD, then that would substitute for double under. I just think you're better serving your community, you're better serving your athletes, you're going to have athletes learning much faster, and it's just better for everybody. So that's what we want to get into is trying to eliminate the triple single in place of a double under and replace those with some usable skills and cues that will help actually synthesize the movement and also start creating the right feeling and the right actions to do a double under, because ultimately that's what we're trying to focus on. So we're going to go over a few of those things that, you know, Nate and I have been working on, and Nate's been doing a lot of private lessons coming in through our facility, and we've been testing a lot of these out for quite a while actually, and the turnaround is fantastic, wouldn't you say?
Yep.
Just great feedback. Varying levels of athletes, right?
Yep. All the way from beginner up to people who can string together 20, 25 doubles in a row. Everyone takes away something pretty important.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's, you know, like any movement, you know, or exercise that you're trying to, you know, improve on, breaking it down into skills and practicing those skills to really develop that good, you know, movement pattern and muscle memory, if you will, and then you start stacking those skills together, right? That's what's going to lead to, you know, just good virtuosity, which is what we're after. Okay, so we want to really try and get away from thinking of double unders as doing them just for completion, or even single unders just doing those for completion anymore. You should be doing those with a purpose of focusing on something to improve, and that's what we want to highlight and offer some suggestions. You know, some of these suggestions are things that we've developed and things that we sell online, but also some DIY options, things that you can just go buy yourself at Home Depot or wherever and create these same type of tools. And we encourage all of you coaches out there to come up with your own ways. We love learning from other people and hearing some creative ideas that people come up with. Yep. Where they've found a different way to skin the cat or kind of get a message across, you know, with you know, a skill-based movement. So love learning new things as well. So, you know, our big thing is that, you know, a double under and a single under effectively look the same. They hold the same posture, positioning, the same motion, if you will, but they're entirely 2 different movements. Would you agree?
Yep, absolutely.
Right. So Nate is a you know, longtime competitive. I call him our pro jumper because he competed in jump rope for about a decade, and so, you know, we have all these chat sessions where, you know, we really try and pick each other's brains, you know, from his competitive world and what he experienced, and from my coaching and gymnastics world and the way we break movement down. So we really blend those together. And so singles, doubles, 2 entirely different movements. They look the same. They seem to act the same, but they really are 2 different movements, and how they feel, the tempo and the timing of those and the intensity are very different. Okay, so what we want to try and start getting coaches to think about in terms of a scaling progression is if they have a new member coming into the gym that is pretty new to jump rope, and let's say, you know, they need to, you know, work on their single unders and practice their single unders. definitely a great place to start. We obviously like that. However, in a WOD that's programmed with double unders, you know, when you scale that for somebody who can only do singles, I think 2 single unders to represent 1 double under is perfect. It's the same amount of work, right? Same amount of work, should take about the same amount of time. Punishing them with making them do 3 to 5 times, to me is kind of pointless, and you're punishing them, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
About the same, you know, same time domain. And so if people need to get better at their singles, great. Do a 2-to-1 ratio. And it's, you know, you're not going to RX the workout anyway, but you're trying to build that skill. But while they're doing those singles, you should be prepping and cueing that athlete to pay attention to their posture, where their hand placement is, what their core, you know, neutral core looks like, what their bounding mechanics look like. You should be cueing the athlete on those things and getting them ready to then take that positioning and move it to their more explosive double under, right? So that's first thing, 2-to-1, right? Get them doing those singles and get those nice and efficient. Love that. Now, they're ready to start. Their singles look fantastic. You're happy with those. Oh, by the way, doesn't have to always be just straight 2-footed single unders, right? Would you agree? Mm-hmm. Give some other examples of things.
You could do some footwork skills. You know, you could do 1-footed jumping. You could move your feet, different planes of movement.
Absolutely.
As you're doing singles.
Yeah, and right off the bat, I mean, just if you want to go in progression, alternate step. Right, so basically running in place, great, you know, skill you can develop out of that. That will lead to better running, obviously. It's all the same hand motion. Like Nate mentioned, doing single-footed, you know, so, you know, right-legged singles, left-legged singles, fantastic for building all that lower leg strength and ankle strength and whatnot. So it doesn't have to always be just straight 2-footed, straightforward singles, okay? So it's nice to mix that up, and all of it is going to benefit the athlete. So singles are looking great. As a coach, you've assessed and you feel like, hey, you're ready to start adding in some progression to learn your double under. You know, the big thing that we really promote here is getting people to focus on their bound. We want the bound to be more of the priority, because we believe that your rope speed needs to match your time in the air, the time that you give it. So if you give the rope more time, then you don't have to work as hard to spin the rope, all right? And it's a fantastic progression from singles to doubles to triples to quads, right? So Nate can do connected quads, and if you watch Nate ramp up from singles to doubles to triples to quads, it's very distinct, yeah? And you would say that's your priority, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
right?
Elevating before rotating.
Elevating before rotating, okay? So we say that often in our workshops. Elevate before rotate. Give yourself time in the air, then that allows the rest of the stuff to kind of take care of itself. You give yourself more time for error or for mistiming, you know, when you have more time in the air. So too often we feel like people are consumed with speeding the rope up, and more priority is placed on ramping up the rope speed, which all it does is creates more tension throughout your arms and shoulders. Also, whenever you create that tension, you tend to pull out of position, and you can't stay in a nice, relaxed, you know, neutral position right outside the pockets. We call it our pocket position. Yeah, so we don't want to go there. We really want to try and let this upper chain be nice and relaxed and maintain its location. That's key. Nate's going to talk about a really great drill that he came up with that helps people find the outer limits of where the good position is versus bad position, okay? But again, bounding and getting the body off the ground is priority over rotating the rope, okay? And what we often say is if you never leave the ground, you have 0% chance of the rope clearing your feet, right? So every incremental amount you get farther off the ground, you've increased your odds dramatically. So think in those terms, okay? So some of the things that we like to have athletes do working on their bounding, obviously we go over posture cues with them, which is an athletic neutral. I don't know if you want to give them a kind of a profile view or rundown of athletic neutral. Maybe give them forward and then profile.
So we're going to do feet together. Abs are tight right here. Hips are going to shift slightly backwards, and now you're in a nice stacked position with your body. From the side here, you can see the hips shift slightly backwards. Core stays strong and stacked.
Yeah, and stay there. If you get athletes that tell you they feel, when you put them in this position, which is just shoulder over hip, over knee, over ankle, but if their athlete tells you they feel like they're in this position, perfectly normal. Absolutely normal for them to feel like that. That's not what we're trying to get them to do. We're not doing a real aggressive hollow gymnastics position, and it's not obviously a pike. We don't like piking. We're looking for vertical, neutral, core engaged and stacked, okay? So just wanted to point that out because you will get people that tell you that, all right? So once you have that positioning, you've now stacked your body so that you are ready for some nice plyometric bounding, right? Everything's stacked so it can stay in line better. And, basically we want to get the athletes exploding. They're used to doing low singles, low quick singles, and they've already perfected that, and you've assessed them. Now we're moving on. We now want them to explode on their bound and get as high as they can, right? Get as high as they can. We don't think they can go too high to learn, to go through this learning progression. It's just going to strengthen their tendons and their muscles and everything else. So some of the things that we do would be, do we want to show maybe the cone drill, just bounding over a cone? Couple of variations.
So we can go here, boom, big jump. Mimicking the explosiveness of a double under. Yeah, and then we can also do back-to-back high jumps, like double unders, back and forth.
Yep, it's a little more aggressive, right? More explosive with that lateral movement. So people, might have a little more difficult time with that. But, it's up to you as the coach to look at the athlete, assess what they can do. The first variation with the little single jumps just to get stacked and prepped into the big explosive jump. It's probably a little bit safer for a starting position. You as the coach can determine what workload you want that to equate to, so if the WOD is programmed with 50 double unders, 3 rounds of pull-ups and kettlebell and 50 double unders, you as the coach can assess and say, hey, every time, every big explosion over the cone counts as a double under, right? That's up to you if you want to do that, or if every single, bounce off the ground counts as a rep. That's up to you, okay? But we just want to make sure that what you're doing is purposeful, they're getting a good synthesis, right? And they're building a skill that's going to translate to the ultimate movement, right, that they're after. So we love the cone, bouncing over the cone. You can look for things in your gym other than a cone. I would just recommend you don't use things. I've heard of some camps that like to use a dumbbell and do bunny hops over a dumbbell. Anything that when you're in a fatigue state during a WOD, anything that you could trip or twist an ankle, it's better to try and be thoughtful and prevent that. So we like low objects. I would say even an ab mat. If you use an ab mat and you jump towards the sloped sides, that way if you do land on it, you're not going to land and roll an ankle as aggressively as if it was a dumbbell or something like that. I wouldn't use a PVC pipe. PVC pipe is really low to the ground, but again, when you're fatigued, if somebody lands on it and it rolls out, so be very thoughtful about what you use to have them bound over. So that's one option. Another option that we like to do is actually use a bounding target. Let's go into the bounding target. So we prefer to put a target overhead rather than have you bound, with something under your feet. We prefer to have you go vertical and have a target for the head because that naturally puts you in a state of extension. Now the goal becomes, hey, I want to go up rather than I want to just get over something, right? So this, we think, perpetuates a lot of good habits if you get people in the right position. So bounding target, he's got it about, a good, I'd say that's between 8 to 10 inches above his head. And then he starts bounding and just making contact, right? You can slide the base up higher if somebody's prepping for triple unders and needs to really work on that extension and keeping their body in a good core position. Good. So bounding targets are great when we like doing that. So it's up to you to find what type of things you want to have your athletes do to synthesize an actual double under. So for me, I would have an athlete do that. If it's 50 double unders, I would say do 50 tempo. We call them tempo bounds and make contact. And to me, you're doing the same amount of work, right? So as far as work capacity and, building your fitness, that is doing way more for you than just doing 3 times the amount of singles. And on top of that, you're prepping them to really do a double under. That's what's really cool about that, okay? So, so once you get through your bounding and you feel like people are, really taking to that and doing a good job, well, now it's time to start adding the hand motion, right? Because the whole thing about bounding and rotating, it's a little bit like, rubbing your tummy and patting your head. They're a little bit at opposite ends, because on the bounding, you want to stay nice and engaged, and you really want to have an explosive takeoff with your core engaged, but you really want your arms to be very relaxed and loosey-goosey. And that's hard for a lot of people to do. People equate that explosion with their whole body tensing up, right? That's the big challenge. And you've got to train people out of that and let them know that they can be very relaxed through your upper chain and your arms, but very engaged and explosive through the lower body. So, a couple of the things that obviously, penguin taps is a very common one, so maybe demonstrate penguin taps. So these have been around forever, and it's a great synthesis. Is double tap when you're airborne. The big thing that I see coaches failing to explain to the athletes is to separate the tap from the explosion, right? And we separate it with exaggeration. We want them to be very separate, because we know once we put a jump rope back in their hands, they're going to do those 2 actions close together. They're going to try and rip the rope and explode too close together. We want them to explode first, then worry about activating. So we try and get the athletes to make contact with their head on the ball first, and at contact, then tap. Okay? So that's the penguin tap. If you do it right, it's a good tool to use. You can use these plastic. How about whichever, plastic handles. So this is something you can go to Home Depot. Let me grab that. You don't have to put this on there. We just do that because we like things to look cool, right? But this is just PEX, P-E-X, and it's in the PVC section at Home Depot. And a 5-foot stick of it, I think, costs around $10 or less. And it's real simple to cut. Great stuff. Different diameters. This is a 3/4 inch diameter. We also use 1/2 inch diameter. So, this is nice. We like people to have kind of the synthesis of jumping rope. And when you jump rope, you usually have something in your hands, a jump rope. So these are, something else you could do is make contact and, swirl your handles. Give it a double swirl, right? A double shake. We kind of like a rotary motion, but rotary motion or up and down are fine. I'm just not a big fan of back and forth, okay? Up and down, isolated or circular, more ideal, okay? So we like that. What we like the most is these tempo trainers, which essentially is just like a little baby's rattle. So if you want to, go to Amazon or Babies R Us and you want to buy some, baby rattles or little maracas, you can use those. It'll do the trick, right? So tempo trainers, the idea with those is that they now give you an auditory cue as well as the kinesthetic, because you can feel the beads hit the bottom, and it really replicates the rope hitting the ground. So you really get a nice feel for what's happening. And so Nate will demonstrate some tempo bounds, making contact. So you notice he's trying to wait till he's airborne before he initiates the shake, okay, and gets him to separate it. But again, so those are some great drills and cues that we'd love to see more gyms doing and adopting as a scaled offering, and do a 1-for-1. Like I would say, 50 double unders in a workout, do 50 tempo bounds. If they're good at tempo bounds and you're ready to add that other skill into it, then add the tempo trainers or grab some little sticks and mimic the motion with the tempo bounds. And I promise you that athletes are going to start getting a better synthesis of what a real double under feels like without tripping up, without constantly tripping up, without whipping themselves to death and then getting a flinch reflex, which we see a ton. What else do you think?
Yeah, these are a great option. Like you said, the penguin taps are really good, and just really dialing into waiting until you're up, you make contact, and then as you're coming down, get that shake in there or get that tap.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So, and that's the way we present it to the athlete, so that we're creating that separation, because in real time, we know those things are going to come much closer together and start happening, on top of each other. So, understand the difference of that. When you have somebody doing drills to create a certain effect, know how that's going to play out in real life, and make those necessary adjustments. Through our years of experience, we know that. We see people just cram these skills together, and again, it's just one of these things again, right? You see people doing this or that, you know what I mean? So, and so you just have to be patient and take them through that. So, now, once you have your bounding pretty consistent for your athletes, you feel good about that. You've now stacked some skill, and now you have them doing some hand motion, right? Synthesizing the turn of the rope, and they're putting those together, after, a couple weeks or what have you, and you feel pretty good about those. Now what we'd like you to do is start having those athletes in a workout that has 50 double unders, say, tell you what, do 50 singles, okay? You're gonna do 50 reps, but every fifth one, attempt a double under, okay? So 4 singles, number 5 is a double under attempt. 4 more singles, number 5 is a double under attempt. They're still doing a total of 50 reps of those movements to equate to 50 double unders, right? Far better served, and again, while they're doing it, you're cueing them to make sure that their positioning it stays the same. Their positioning, where their hands are, how they're bounding, how they're keeping their body engaged is staying consistent when they explode for the double under. Nothing should change other than you give the rope more time to allow that second rotation. Obviously, if they can land and go right into the next set of singles and then into the double, that's fantastic. What's really important about that sequence is that we find if you let an athlete stay in that too long, where they always perform one double under and then come back to singles, they develop a pattern where they're just kind of single double pattern. They're stuck to that. They have a hard time doing repetitive bounds to start linking double unders. So as a coach, it's really important that you pay attention to that. And when you see that they can string the set together, no problem, right away you got to start adding another double under, okay? So I would say in that situation, you would move to 3 single unders and then 2 double unders. 3 single unders, 2 double unders. So you start taking away a single, adding a double. And it's going to be a little bit difficult at first, because the athlete's going to do that big explosion, make their double, and then want to come back down and stay down for the single, and they have a hard time getting themselves to explode. So, what Nate and I will do when we see somebody that has that pattern ingrained, which is quite often, right, is that basically, you have to, get them to explode twice in a row, whether the rope clears or not, and you just coach them to that. If it's not during a WOD, if it's just doing some training off to the side or before class or after class, what I'll do is I'll actually take the rope out of that athlete's hands, and I'll make them go through the sequence, 3 singles, 2 doubles, give them a bounding target, or I'll just hold my hand over their head and have them make contact twice. Put the rope back in their hands and say, do exactly the same thing with the rope now. 3 singles, 2 doubles. And what you'll find is that they'll finally let themselves explode that second rep, but they might flub with the rope, which is okay. We need to get them off the ground first. That's most important.
And then also, sometimes athletes will jump half their height on that second double. It's really good to point out, try to jump higher on the second rep than the first.
Absolutely. Perfect point. Perfect point. Yeah, give them a tangible action to think about, and going higher on your second, higher on your third. And you're going to use those exact same cues when you start getting those advanced athletes into triple unders. Exact same thing, right? That's what we go for. So effectively what we shoot for is to teach athletes slow double unders. And they're so much easier to learn when you do a slow double under. Please don't confuse that with doing slow singles and then adding a double under. We're not fans of that. You can use that. Some coaches have good success with that, and that's the way they're used to teaching it. We don't think that leads to long-term efficacy of movement. It doesn't translate down the line, because doing slow high singles causes the athlete to make a bigger hand circle, a bigger hand motion, right? And then when they go for the double, they then tighten it up, right? So it kind of induces tension. We don't like that, and we don't like the direction that goes. People will learn it that way, but then they're kind of limited in their skill set as far as what they can do when they're training onto another skill. So we really like to keep the singles low so that it keeps that hand motion nice and tight, and then that hand motion doesn't change. Now just your elevation and explosion changes. Okay, so that's the way we like to approach it, and we've had a ton of success around the world teaching it that way. And again, that translates better from singles to doubles to triples or even quads, right? So I want to have Nate show you the drill. Hand positioning is awesome, right? It's very important as far as knowing. And we always tell athletes, hey, when you push your hands wide, you're shortening the rope. We always say that to them. And they go, okay, coach, and they hear you. But what Nate has athletes do, which is super smart, is actually purposely do that and start learning their tolerances of what happens and how much play they have in their arms. So go ahead and show them what you're talking about.
So we'll start with just basic singles here. And you can go for about 5 reps each, 5 going out, 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 and cueing the athletes to go out, 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 and then 5 going in, and simply just repeating this back and forth and telling them to reach farther in or farther out, either direction, so that they really can understand what a correction with their arms feels like.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, there's so much you gain by doing that drill and learning, cause and effect, right? And the other thing they're going to learn is that as they go wide, they're going to feel that rope actually tighten up on the toes, maybe start nipping at their toes. As they come narrow, they're going to feel the rope pushing away, but start making more impact and drag on the ground. And that teaches the athlete to start really repositioning their hands to keep a consistent contact point. And that's what we're always after, a real consistent contact point. About a shoe length in front of your toes is what you're targeting for the most part, right? So, yeah, and anything else? What do you think? We covered everything?
Yeah, I think that's about it. I mean, those are all really important cues, and that will make a dramatic difference for an athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. So remember, our big premise is let's replace punishment with progression, and let's start, injecting those into your workouts that you guys program for the athletes that don't have that skill yet, and really start building some usable skill that will turn turn into that ultimate movement that they're trying to perfect, okay? One last thing I'll add in closing is your advanced athletes that have double unders, a lot of times they could really use these drills as well, because we see advanced athletes and we coach games athletes all the time that are uber talented, have no clue what they're doing, and they perform based off of athleticism and talent, but they don't really have a foundation and a progression and a skill set to follow. So again, trying to teach them that next harder skill or more advanced skill becomes a stumbling block, right? So have your advanced athletes do the same thing, right? Will only make them better. And then on top of that, have your advanced athletes start using some variation of jump ropes, get them off always using their speed rope, have them use heavier ropes, have them use smaller, shorter ropes, have them use longer ropes. Like, you want to make that athlete, get them exposed to all the different, stimuli that's out there so that they know how to deal with it, right? And they're more well-rounded, and that's just going to make them a much better athlete. So, yeah, that's all we got. Looking forward to getting your questions coming over, as well as suggestions. I'm sure there's a lot of you out there that have some great things that you've come up with that works well in your gym, and we'd love to hear about those too. We know there's a lot of other creative people out there. So thanks a lot, guys.